Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to r/EntitledPeople, where you know the deal. People think they're all that and a lot more. And in this episode, people are dealing with horribly entitled bosses, guys. We've got power-tripping Karens getting demoted, getting fired, and one OP tells a story about the time they worked for a boss who was infatuated with a worker. And the story gets pretty wild. I hope you enjoy the lineup today. Don't shake your heads too hard, and as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. So back in my 20s, which was decades ago, I worked for a large national sewer and drain business. It was a great job and a great place to work, where I was lucky enough to be trained by some of the most skilled technicians in the industry. There was, however, one supervisor who, let's call him Billy, the entitled a-hole of the story. Now, Billy was your typical kiss-up, who spent most of his time trying to please anyone who he thought held any influence or power, like the branch or regional manager. He also loved to lord his power over anyone who he thought he could push around. Billy was the workplace bully who just happened to have power. A typical interaction with one of the big earners would be something like, "Hey, you need a day off, just let me know when and I'll be happy to help you." While if he was dealing with a new hire or a low earner, you were lucky if he would pick up the phone or take a second to hear you out. He treated those guys like dirt. That said, one night, around my third month on the job, I was sent to a mortuary to do some work. And while it was gross, hazard jobs like that paid really well. Maybe $200 in your pocket for an hour's work. After I finished, I called him and told him that I was taking the rest of the night off due to some chemicals in the sewer making me feel a little woozy, and I don't think it would be safe for me to operate heavy machinery. Well, hearing me say that, Billy flips out, and he told me if I don't get back on the road, I would have a disciplinary hearing the next day, to which I replied, "Sure, can't wait to see you there." As soon as I walked in, I requested someone from HR be present, as well as our assigned safety officer. The safety officer position in the company is very important, as the company self-insures, and any safety violation can get you fired on the spot. I let Billy go first, and he says, "You can't just leave whenever you want from your shift. You're getting a warning, and next time I'm going to fire you. Try me." That's when I calmly reach into my bag and I pull out the employee handbook, and I began to read. Now, while I don't remember the exact phrasing, it goes something like this. If you feel at any time that the situation or job you're on is dangerous or may lead to a dangerous situation, you are to stop immediately. There was another section about being inebriated, exposed to methane gas from the sewer, being lightheaded, etc., and how you should go home and not operate any equipment under those conditions. It even went so far to say that the transportation would be paid for by the company if you don't feel safe driving. I asked the safety manager if I did anything wrong, and the guy supported me 100%. I then asked HR what they thought, and they said if it's a safety issue, you go home and don't worry about your shift. At this point, the regional manager asked me to leave the office, and I can hear him ripping into Billy like a fat kid into cake. Now, that should have been enough for me, but after that, Billy starts picking on me. I had a target on my back. I just ignored him and kept working my job. As time goes on, I become one of the top earners in my company. I get Rookie of the Year my first year and Salesman of the Year my second, and Billy gets a reputation of being lazy and irresponsible. My second year at the company, Billy's put on probation, and this is where I decide to get back at him. I gather up all the new guys and some of my buddies from my shift, and I organize them so at least once or twice a week, someone goes in there to complain about Billy. We never lied, we just knew what buttons to push to get him to self-destruct. The new guys would ask for a day off, or somebody would take a sick day during a busy shift. Finally, the branch manager snaps and calls Billy into his office. He demotes him to salesman and puts him on my shift. And the thing about my shift is everyone hated Billy. During Billy's first few weeks on the road, our supervisor makes sure that he gets all the fun jobs. He goes to flooded basements, tight spaces, basically anything that will get him absolutely covered in disgusting stuff. And of course, as all this was happening, people kept calling him for scheduling changes, etc., etc. So he had to explain to about 30 people how he was demoted and no longer a manager. Eventually, Billy broke, and he starts crying to the dispatcher how he couldn't take it anymore and quit. The next day, me and 2 other guys threw a Billy's Gone party with cake and pizza at a neighborhood bar. We put up signs in the office, and we make announcements in the morning when we went to hand in paperwork. Billy was there, and he actually came up to us to thank us for hosting a going-away party. And I got the pleasure of informing him that he's not invited. I told Billy it's not a going-away party, it's a you're gone party. In the end, only about 20 of the 50 employees at the branch showed up, but it was still a great party. My goodness, guys, that Billy's Gone party is absolutely savage, isn't it? And I'm gonna be honest, I'm not gonna lie, I can't help but to feel a bit bad for Billy in the end, where the whole place just basically laughed at him for getting demoted and rubbing his face in the celebration. But you know what? On the other hand, act like a pompous, entitled a-hole jerk while in power. I can't help but to feel that he deserved it. Guys, let me know your thoughts. Did OP go too far, or was it just the right amount of F you, Billy, for being such a bad boss? Okay, so this adventure plays out over the course of a couple of months. This story's mine, as well as my 2 friends, Cassie and Alyssa. I also want to note that everybody was paid under the table, and yes, I know it was dumb. I had just gotten out of the hospital, and I was looking for a low-effort job that would allow me to take in a bit of money while still being able to recover. Luckily enough, my friend Cassie calls me asking if I'd be interested in becoming an in-house photographer for the barn she worked at. They needed promotional materials and wanted to offer my services as a package for events. So a little backstory on the barn. This takes place in Canada, so -30 winters, and the barn is way out of the way, like 15 minutes out of my small town. Without seeing it online, you wouldn't see it unless you drove past on the range road. The place trained and boarded horses, taught kids to ride, had day camps, did parties, so on and so forth. The place is owned by an absolute battle axe of a woman named Sarah, the Karen of the story. The woman owns many of the horses, and she did much of the training of both animals and students, and she has absolutely no idea how to run computer technology. Due to the last fact, Cassie and Alyssa became the de facto managers of the entire place. The 3 of us were in charge of everything more complicated than a pager. Everyone answered to Cassie and Alyssa while I took care of the tech, with the exception of the website, which was owned and maintained by Cassie. The 4 of us were the only people who worked there that were being paid, as absolutely everything else was done by volunteers. There were youths, elders, and students, and none of them were paid. All of them hated Sarah, and they loved the 3 of us because we weren't complete C-words. And here's another fact about Sarah. This woman absolutely can't get a relationship. She's an old and angry lady, so she just naturally exudes an aura of hate that drives people away. Bringing us to Rick. Rick is one of the aforementioned volunteers. He's a lovely Englishman who moved here, and he worked on the barn during his downtime. Sarah was immediately infatuated with Rick. In fact, she developed almost an obsession for this man. Unfortunately, the 20-year age gap was incredibly off-putting for Rick. Not to mention that he wasn't attracted to Sarah, so he attempted to maintain a business relationship. But Sarah did not appreciate this. Cassie and Rick, however, were much closer in age, and they hit it off perfectly on the other hand. So of course, Sarah was mega jealous. Cassie was 30 years younger than Sarah, and she was mad that Rick was giving Cassie the attention. This led to Sarah loudly reprimanding Cassie over absolutely everything possible, anywhere, anytime, including in front of kids. The ones I can remember are 1. Spending way too much time with Rick during work. 2. Spending too much time with Rick outside of work. 3. being 30 seconds late to work, and 4. Accusing Cassie of insulting Sarah behind her back. And seriously, this woman made up lies in her head to the point she believed it. Alyssa and Cassie are very close, so Alyssa naturally got a bit of the flack due to that friendship, but nothing of note. I did not, as I kept my head down as long as she paid me. All of this went on for about 2 months. It was 2 months of Cassie getting crapped on every single day while she was also doing university, and she was starting to crack under pressure. Sarah even had the nerve to tell Alyssa that if Cassie didn't stop hanging out with Rick, she might have to fire her. Now, as I said before, Cassie was getting reprimanded at work for hanging out with Rick outside of work too much. We were all very confused by this for many reasons, namely, how would she know and why did she think it wasn't okay they were hanging out? We solved the how a few days later when Cassie's mother saw Sarah's very distinctive purple convertible driving past their house, slowing down as it passed. I live across the street from them and I personally witnessed it a few times while in my backyard. By our count, it happened 3 or 4 times a day, off and on for weeks, and that's only what we saw. Supposedly, she would also drive past the bars where Cassie and Rick would hang out to check if their cars were there. Beyond jealousy, we were never able to solve the why, unfortunately. The stalking, of course, was the final straw. Sarah had gone too far weeks ago, but this was way beyond that. Cassie calmly walks into the office and she informs Sarah that she would no longer be working for her due to the above reasons and that she owed her for the unpaid time. That's when Sarah proceeds to have a screaming fit, how Cassie needs her, while Cassie just walked out, said goodbye to the volunteers, took her things, and left. A few days later, Alyssa proceeds to inform Sarah that she's pregnant and she'll be leaving as well due to an unhealthy work environment. I have no backbone and I just sent her my invoice for unpaid work and ghosted Sarah for a while. On top of all of this, the volunteers had for the most part only stayed this long for Cassie and Alyssa, which led to all of them leaving once they found out what happened. So in the end, Sarah was left with no office staff, a brand new invoice software that she had no idea how to use, 3 fairly large bills for unpaid work, and several events lined up, which she was screwed for because of everything else. Now, some people might think that that was the end of it all. We somewhat accidentally crippled her operations, but no. Sarah decided not to pay Cassie and I. I eventually got paid for less than half of what I was owed several months later after numerous phone calls. Sarah didn't want to pay Cassie out of spite, as I guess in her mind, Cassie stole her boyfriend. Cassie didn't argue. After the first few phone calls, she simply acted. Earlier, I mentioned that both the business was impossible to find without prior knowledge from the website or getting lucky, as well as that Cassie owned and maintained the website. Cassie and I worked out that we would take everything that was ours and leave Sarah to figure it out. In the space of a few hours, Cassie had informed Sarah what was happening, followed by deleting absolutely everything from the website and purging all pictures she had taken for Sarah that she hadn't been paid for. At the same time, I was doing the same for all my videos. I was taking down everything I still owned, as well as clearing the backups that Sarah could access if she was able to figure it out. To this day, 2 years later, her business has not recovered. Her website is an early 2000s disaster with poor quality photos in place of my semi-professional photos. She has absolutely no videos promoting her various services, and the list of services she has been cut in half. The business went from being incredibly popular and lucrative to being nearly dead in the space of a few months. She sold off most of the animals, and absolutely everyone in the horse industry of our area knows what she's like. In the end, everyone turned out happy. Cassie becomes a teacher this year, and Alyssa had an adorable baby, and I have a semi-decent tech career. And to think, guys, all of this happened because that Karen was spiteful and refused to pay up. The stalking OP's friend and Rick was a bit over the top though. Like, yeah, one of your employees is hanging with somebody that you happen to have a thing for, but that doesn't mean you should start treating the employees like crap and driving past their house. Super psycho vibes. And if you think that was wild, listen to this person's story. This is a bit of a wild one, but here we go. I'm a 25-year-old male, and I used to work at a mid-sized company. My boss Karen is a much older woman, and she was a textbook example of entitlement. The woman loved to micromanage, take credit for everyone's work, and she would throw tantrums if things didn't go her way. At first, I figured she was just difficult, but things took a turn when she starts making comments about my appearance. She would say things like, "You clean up well," or "It's nice to finally have some eye candy around here." I just brushed it off as awkward attempts at humor, but then it escalated. Karen started finding excuses to be alone with me in her office to get to know me better. She would call me into her office just to talk about random things, nothing ever work-related. One day, when I was sitting in the break room, she straight up says to me, "You know, if you played your cards right, you could get a promotion." At that, I was shocked. I tried to laugh it off, and I told her I wasn't interested as I have a girlfriend, but she doesn't back down. Over the next few weeks, her behavior became more aggressive. She would text me outside of work hours, send me emails, and she even hinted that she would make my life difficult if I didn't take her out on at least a few dates. At this point, I knew I had to act. I start documenting everything, text messages, emails, and even recorded one conversation. I also confided in a trusted coworker who had witnessed some of Karen's behavior and agreed to back me up. When I felt like I had enough evidence, I went straight to HR. I laid everything out, including the recordings, and I made it clear I wasn't comfortable working under Karen anymore. To their credit, HR took the complaint seriously. They launched an investigation and they placed Karen on leave during the process. A few weeks later, I was called into a meeting where HR informs me that Karen was terminated. They apologized for what they had gone through, and they even offered me a transfer to a different department. The fallout was messy. Apparently, Karen tried to sue the company for wrongful termination, but with all the evidence I provided, her case didn't go anywhere. As for me, I'm still at the company, enjoying my new role. It was a stressful experience, but I'm glad I stood up for myself. So for some context, I'm an autistic 18-year-old male who started a new job late last year. Relationships have always been a touchy subject since I was always picked on in high school for not being normal, in the sense of having romantic interests. Couple that with the fact that I don't like people, that makes me very scared for my future. Straight off the bat, my boss was one of those people who can't understand that not everyone in life is an alcoholic with a sex addiction. So he would always be nagging me about whether I've gone out with my friends, been out on the town, or was going drinking every weekend. And here's the thing, I don't drink at all, and my friends and I meet like 2 times a year. But since I was different, his latest obsession at the time was asking whether or not I was dating. And it's not as simple, "Do you have a partner?" but more of an incessant nag of, "Have you ever had a girlfriend?" Or, "Did you ever date anyone in high school or have a crush?" The list goes on and on. I eventually just tell him that I don't actually like anyone at the moment, nor do I have the capacity to like anyone, as I've never felt the slightest bit of romantic interest in anyone in my whole life. He obviously wasn't happy with this, and he corners me in the break room one day, and the guy starts bombarding me with stuff I don't want to hear. He's saying stuff like how I need to get out more or else I'll die lonely, how I'll meet a girl and she'll change my life, and that I'll change my mind about not wanting kids someday when I find the right girl, so on and so forth. He actually spent a good chunk of time talking to me about how to get a girl. One day, he corners me again, and I'm not really in the mood. So I just do the usual, "Hey, I'm incapable of having a relationship because I don't like people." He obviously pushes this matter, stating like some sort of expert how I just haven't met the right girl yet, and I need to get out more to develop my game. At this point, I've had enough. So I chip in a little lie, and I tell him, "No, seriously, boss man, my therapist said that it's likely linked to the heavy abuse I suffered as a child. My mother was a monster who took pleasure in torturing us our whole lives. I probably won't ever like anyone." Needless to say, the guy turns red with embarrassment and he kind of left his mouth open for a bit. And eventually he said, "Well," before trailing off and conveniently finding something else to do around the shop. Kind of brief, I know, but the priceless look on his face was worth it. He did try bringing up my biological mother one more time after this on a personal level. He asked me, "So, what did your mom do?" while raising his hand, signifying a beating. I just told him I'm not willing to talk about it, turning the already awkward conversation for him that he started into a very long silence. Since then, he's been more subtle with his probing, but he never fully stopped. And it's been one of the many things that me and my much more understanding colleagues have laughed about. Entitled idiot bosses, I tell you. Like, I just don't get how some people literally think that just because they're your boss at work means they are your boss in life, and you should divulge super personal information to them. Like, it is baffling how OP told him so many times that they're uncomfortable giving details about their life, and instead of shutting up, the guy just doubles down and asked for more details. Like, that's considered workplace harassment, isn't it? My goodness, the audacity of some people. So I've been in retail since 2009, and my now last job, I was there since 2014. I won't go into huge details about the work environment, but to summarize, the whole time I was there, my boss, despite always saying that family time's important, would always screw over my personal time off. When I worked directly under him, a lot of times, he would cancel my days off because he was taking a trip somewhere. Coupled with that and the childish and immature coworkers who threw tantrums and gave silent treatments, I was at the end of my rope. My job mostly consisted of delivering building material. I had a certain certificate to operate a certain type of delivery truck, and this certification was going to expire at the end of the year. About a week or so into January, HR comes to do a review with me. During the review, they mentioned that they're holding a course to revalidate the certification for everyone in the company in 2 weeks. They said, "It's on your weekend off, but are you able to attend?" I look at my calendar and I said I had plans booked that day, so it doesn't work to my schedule. My company wanted to get everyone done at once. That way, they save money on group training. HR just said, "See what you can do to attend." And I said the plans were set in stone and things were left at that. So about a week before the course, HR emails me again, saying that this course is critical for my job, so try to attend. I reply again, it doesn't work for my schedule, that I'd be happy to do it any other day, but that this is going on during my weekend off, where I made plans well in advance, so it doesn't work for my schedule. For a few days, there was nothing else. My boss owns a few stores, and one worker from another store comes by who was also going to the course. They told me he had been making plans with his fiancée for the past several months for that weekend, but he had to cancel them because they suddenly revealed this training course he had to attend. He wasn't too happy that the plans he made for months had to be canceled. I said nothing to him. I figured it was his choice if he chose to do that. Then suddenly, my boss began phoning me 2 days before the course. He calls me and says, "Hey OP, HR tells me that you're unable to attend the training course." I respond, "That's correct. I unfortunately made plans in advance, so I can't attend." After a moment of silence, he says, No, I need you to get this training done." I respond, "Okay, I understand that, but I made plans well in advance. I can't just cancel." He then says to me, "Okay, you realize that when we notify you 2 weeks in advance, it doesn't mean it's optional. This is mandatory." At this point, I was starting to get mad. I reply, "Okay, I understand that, but I've been planning this weekend since early December. I'll be out a lot of money if I cancel." He asked, "What are you doing?" I respond, "That's a private matter. I can't discuss that." He then goes silent for a few seconds, and then he says, "Okay, well, you're gonna have to do this training on your own time and your own money then." The training itself only cost a few $100s, but by this point, I had it with my boss. I respond, "We will cross that bridge when we get there." He then goes silent again, and he says, "That's pretty rich coming from you. Do you know who you're talking to?" I respond, "Well, I'm sorry, but I received no heads up, no communication that this was being planned for that date." He then goes silent again, and he tells me, "OP, I'm not happy right now." I respond, "Well, I'm sorry, but I have a life. I can't just cancel things when I make plans on my day off." He then says, "Okay, bye." So for a week, I heard nothing. I continued my job as normal while looking for a new job because I had it with my boss. 9 years of this, and I had reached my breaking point during that phone call. This boss has always screwed me over for my personal time off, and this was the last straw of trying to force me to come in on my scheduled weekend off. And then 1 week later, towards the end of the day, HR shows up. They informed me that they were laying me off due to an extremely slow season with hopes of having me come back in spring. I said nothing, choosing to leave on a high note, but I knew it was really their way of firing me without firing me. That way, they avoid paying severance, which would have been in the tens of thousands of dollars. I estimate in between $10,000 and $40,000. I already looked into it, and unfortunately, I have no real way of proving this is retaliation. All their paperwork, which I know is a lie, say that I was laid off for lack of work. Other than this backhanded move, I'm glad to be out of there. I was unhappy, stressed, and fed up. I'm using the time to advance my driver's license to have the highest one I can get in my country. Yeah, what a horrible situation to be in, and it sucks that OP lost all that severance. And if I were OP, I would be looking at consulting an employment lawyer about this because something doesn't sound right about a layoff and losing all your severance. Like, that is a good chunk of money. But yeah, when OP's boss said that family time was important, they meant their family time is important. Who cares about the peasants working, right? But that's entitled people for you guys. I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/petty revenge episode, where psycho Karens are getting taught lessons left and right. Guys, go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.